Hey travelers, today we are talking about travel advice and which you should rely on more, travel agents or TripAdvisor. If you enjoy the video, don't forget to give us a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe. So before I get started, let me premise this on the entire conversation on the basis that the travel agent who is giving you advice is an actual travel agent, not just a hobby agent, which is basically somebody who woke up one day and decided they were going to be a travel agent, booked in with an agency, and may or may not have even left their hometown to travel to anywhere. I'm talking about a bona fide travel agent who does this for a living and travels on a regular basis so they know actually what they're talking about. I mean, let's face it, if all the person has done is attend a webinar and look through a brochure, they're not really qualified to advise you on what the best place is for you to spend your hard-earned vacation dollars. So with that aside, let's get down to it. Now, I know a lot of people truly believe that TripAdvisor provides unbiased reviews. And it does offer some good advice, but it's all needed to be taken with a grain of salt. It's an anonymous system, so unfortunately, it makes it impossible for it to all be accurate and believable. Do I think it might be useful to track out TripAdvisor if there's no other source of information about a resort other than looking at the hotel website? Absolutely, but like I say, it needs to be taken with a grain of salt because of these top 6 reasons. TripAdvisor is anonymous, which means people can write whatever they think about a resort, but by virtue of this, it can't be verified if the review was written by somebody who even stayed at the resort. If you see multiple terrible reviews for a place, is it because a whole bunch of people all randomly had bad experiences? Or is it, which I have experienced, or what I've actually seen, which is, for example, a group, it was a wedding group in particular, who got absolutely wrecked on shooter after shooter, sitting in the hot sun all afternoon, no hats on, basically gave themselves alcohol poisoning and sunstroke. And then they wrote reviews saying that they got food poisoning because the food was bad. Also, you know, if you go as a couple and your husband writes a bad review and then you write a bad review, you've just written 2 separate reviews. If you don't cross-reference them, people, even though they're completely redundant, people will think that it's 2 separate experiences altogether. A lot of resorts encourage or actually incentivize their employees to seek out positive reviews and mentions on TripAdvisor. The resort then checks how many mentions each employee gets each month, and then they can get perks such as dinner at the resort, a day pass for their family, or even a free night stay. So this isn't necessarily a bad thing. We always want to encourage employees to give great service. But let's say, for example, you get chummy with one of the resort employees and you wanted a bottle of wine to enjoy in your room, which they're not allowed to give you, but they bend the rules and they give it to you. Are you writing the review because you got exceptional service or because you liked the person and wanted to thank them and mention them so that they can get a free hotel stay? Back to the whole anonymity piece. I've actually had staff tell me that they've been asked to go online and submit negative reviews of neighboring resorts. Seriously. Now this can happen when, for example, a new resort opens up and creates competition. One resort starts to suffer in terms of occupancy levels, so the staff write reports about bed bugs or food poisoning. It's a normal human response to fight for your job and your ability to make a living. So, I mean, I get why they do this, but it means an even greater need to expect that not all reviews are honest. The real question is, what percent are not honest? Is it 5%, 25%, 75%? There's absolutely no way to know this. In December 2014, TripAdvisor was fined 500,000 euros for improper commercial practices. Back in 2015, a bunch of Italian restaurant owners became frustrated with exactly these types of manipulated reviews. So they took their story to the local newspaper who created a fake restaurant, and they all wrote a bunch of fake reviews. This resort soared to the top, becoming the #1 recommended restaurant in town, even though it didn't exist. Now, apparently the restaurant was exposed as a fake, and then all the comments and restaurant profile were deleted from TripAdvisor within 10 minutes. This isn't the only example of something like this that you'll find on the internet. So going back to the premise that we believe what people say, here's number 4. Most travel agents who are worth their salt will invest in themselves by traveling to the key areas that they sell. I've been to over 300 resorts in Mexico and the Caribbean because that's where my business has been focused. Personally, I find it really difficult to sell a destination wedding to a bride when I can't even tell them if the beach is nice or the sand is rocky or the food is served hot. You also can't tell how loud the nearby road is from looking at a photograph, and you certainly can't smell any nearby sewage runoff from a video review. So when a client describes to me their perfect vacation, I can mentally run through a list of resorts, no, not that one, maybe that one, to come up with the one that I think is going to fit them best. I have arrived at resorts that looked like serene paradise, low music, kind of a calming spa-like Zen experience, and you certainly think that is perfect for a certain type of client. But then the next day, a slightly different crowd turns up at the pool, and it's become day drunk, ugly drunk, spring break party central with music crammed, loud, and half the swim-up bar participants require security to bring them a wheelchair because they can't even walk. It's important to understand that the resort only makes up part of the experience. A good part of that is the clientele. So as travel agents, we tend to ask a lot of questions of the staff, like, what's the occupancy today? In other words, how full is the resort? Is this amount of kids that you see here today, is that normal, or are they usually more or less? Is it mostly couples? Is it a lot of singles? Where are the majority of guests from? That's a big one. All these can factor in, have a huge factor into the type of resort experience that you're going to see. For example, it's not customary to tip in a lot of European countries, so if that's the majority of guests at a resort, staff are unlikely to expect a tip. Now, some might say that therefore the service is consistent for all guests, whether or not you're slapping a dollar bill on the table or not. Conversely, if the predominant guests are from North America, tipping is the norm, and some will complain that maybe they get bad service if they're not tipping. Then again, I've also found that please and thank you and asking politely for a drink as opposed to, hey, give me a beer, are equally appreciated to tipping. People always tell me they want a 5-star resort, and then they tell me their travel budget, which is going to get them a 2-star at best. Now, let's talk about that for a second. Name me one resort in Mexico or the Caribbean that has a 1-star rating. Exactly, they don't exist. It's even difficult to find a 2-star property. I think there's one in Cancun, and that's it. But generally speaking, all resorts think they are 3 stars or better. And in fact, a lot of the resort websites will say everyone's 5 stars, even if they're 3 kilometers from the beach, have only 2 restaurants, don't offer any international name brand alcohol, have rock hard beds, scratchy sheets, and one of those shampoo cleanser all-in-one dispensers on the wall of the shower. Like, come on. Does that put them at the same level as, say, Moon Palace, where guests can enjoy more than 13 dining options, or the 5-star LeBlanc Resort, where every room has butler service, handcrafted soap, Bulgari toiletries, gourmet dining, top shelf drinks, plus they have the most amazing custom-made beds that you actually will sleep like better than you have in your life. So I prefer to talk about resorts as high-end, mid-range, or if we're talking about that 5-star nowhere near the beach resort that I mentioned, that would be cheap and cheerful. Although sometimes you have to be pretty tolerant and just happy to be in the sun in order for that cheerful part to happen. It's great to do your research yourself. Just remember that the review that you've just read that talks about an awesome destination or a terrible place to stay may have been written by somebody who's never been anywhere before, or maybe they're well-traveled. It's impossible to know. find a travel agent who travels frequency to keep up with the constant resort and area changes, and they can give you solid qualified advice. So I hope you enjoy this video, and stay tuned for some more.